Denmark
No.
is a flying machine built in the future. I shouldn't say this on camera, but yes, it's bad.
Polonius
Right.
always handles it except for a knife through an heiress. Other than that,
Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe you're crazy. Maybe we're crazy.
Today, I've been looking forward to for this segment. I'll tell you why, because this is part of Hamlet I have a problem with. This is a
okay.
part of Hamlet where I have questions to the effect of what is happening
Okay.
and meanings of things. So it's a very, this is the third part of Act Two, and arguably the most, at least for me, the most complex part. Take
Interesting.
it from what it's
Okay,
worth.
cool. Yeah, let's dive into this. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so we
So-
just came off of a scene. We went fishmonger, which was kind of that antic disposition with Polonius, which then
Yes.
turned into Rosencrantz and Guildenstern showing up, which Hamlet found them out. They admitted to being sent for by the king and queen. Hamlet seemingly got very vulnerable and very honest in what a piece of work is a man.
Yes.
And then it led on to the players are coming. And that's kind of where we are at the moment, right? Did I miss anything that maybe that you need to know from previous episodes?
Well, let's see. Not much happens in the first couple of acts. Then basically Hamlet meets a bunch of school buddies. One's smart, one's dumb. And then some actors come. That's pretty much it. No.
Okay, good.
It's at this point, Hamlet is treating his pals, Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, with mirth, for lack of a better term. Even though, there's an instinctive part of him that understands that, why are they holding back at me? Why do I have to kind of wring the truth of them? He's asked them 100 times to tell them what's going on, and they still kind of hold back. So he notes that, if not his conscious brain, at least in his unconscious brain for the time being. We ended with the lines, blood, there is something in this more than natural if philosophy could find it out.
Correct.
So it's Hamlet sort of speaking his mind, also giving sort of a reference to his father's ghost.
Yes, and it reminds us of there's more things in heaven and earth, Horatio,
yes,
than are dreamt of in our philosophy. Again, if philosophy could find it out, meaning philosophy is inadequate to give us the answers. Right. Yeah. Okay. Right.
And so
the flourish of trumpets. So what's interesting? You know that I love this Neil Freeman version. I always talk about this little Neil Freeman version.
Yes.
It's basically a printing of the first folio. He sets things off in lines a little bit. He lets you know what's different from the folio and the quarto. But and I'm not sure. I do a little more research, but everything from here on out in this version is listed as Act 2, Scene 2, which is funny because I think. Remember I said earlier on that Shakespeare kind of does the first couple acts and then just everything runs together. And he does a couple scenes and everything runs together. I'm going to have to look at that old facsimile that I think we all have and see. It may be, because we know Shakespeare was writing these plays very quickly. He may have got to a point where he was just writing and not worried about breaking them down into scenes. And from here on out, acts and scenes may only be a modern kind of addition to the plays, which is really interesting. But anyways, that's a side note.
Yeah, no, which makes one wonder who or what group of people did make that choice when it came to produce, later editions. Who thought? My guess it would have been actors who kind of decided, okay, this would be a good spot to break this or what have you.
Yeah, I think in modern, like if you and I were to go into rehearsal tomorrow to do this, I think it's helpful for us in rehearsal, but in performing the plays, I like the idea of blurring the break between scenes. You know what I mean? I like the idea of
Yes.
it all kind of being one. In a rehearsal process, it's useful, but once you're telling the story, it's I like the fact that it's one story, you know.
Yes. Um, eh, on the next line of text.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting before we get to what's included in the text is that I always kind of, every time I read it, I think that Hamlet is talking to the players, even though that's completely wrong. He's not talking to the players. But for
It
some
looks
reason,
right.
maybe because, a flourish for the players, and we've just been told that the players are coming. And so when Hamlet says, "Gentlemen, you are welcome to Elsinore," I'm thinking he's talking to the players. Of course,
Of
he's
course,
not.
I think you're right. On the page, it absolutely looks like that. And it's not until you get on your feet that you realize, oh, the flourish is off stage, so I must be talking to these two jerks.
Yes, exactly. Um, and if, and of course, the clue is the tail end of Hamlet's mini speech to Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, where he says, "You are wrong about one thing. I am but mad northwest." I mean, it's one of my favorite
Yeah.
lines. When the winter suddenly,
I
I
mean,
know.
yeah, so I I think in this whole session we're about to have here, I think I'm going to end up asking you far more questions than I am going to be able to give answers, because I have my idea about what's coming up, but I'm very interested in kind of your take on some of this. For instance, that line you just said, why give himself away so much? You know what I mean? He's been honest. What a piece of work is a man. The world is flat, stale, unproper. He gives this whole thing of quintessence of dust, like lost all course of exercise, all these things. So he's honest. But then he basically says to them, I'm putting on an antic disposition, right? He kind of comes out and says it. I pretend to be crazy this way, but I know what's going on. Why is that, do you think?
Okay, it just hit me now. As processing that question, it's a good point. And I think the news that the players are here and Hamlet's formation, his brain is starting to work on a plan. And that gives life to him, in addition to the superficial joy of, hey, I love when the actors come. I very much enjoy the work. I'm passionate about it. So it gives him some life and hope. And sometimes when you're in a good mood, you find yourself revealing truths as an aside. It's because you're like a different person in that state. And that's kind of when Hamlet says that, he's just like full of joy, almost drunk with joy.
Yeah, it's funny you say that, because the two times I've been lucky enough to put the shoes on, when you hear the players coming on stage, as a character, yes, but also as the actor, it makes you so happy, because you get to be joyful for a moment in the play. At this point, you are a bit already kind of exhausted. You're weighted down. Yeah. Your friends are tricking you, all this kind of stuff. And then for the next small section, because normally the interval comes after the big speech coming up, you have a break coming up, but you just know you get to celebrate for a second. And what you just described is exactly how the actor feels himself.
Oh, that's interesting. Yeah. Because that's, and again, I didn't really put thought into it until right here now, as we're taping this.
I think you're right. There is joy. I think maybe what if it's a little bit of, I don't know, this doesn't maybe make sense, but looking at RNG and saying, I'm on to you guys as well, like, don't cross me kind of thing. Like, hey, maybe a slight threat. I don't see threat is the right word, but like, I know what's going on. I'm very aware of what's going on. Because he also has to know that part of RNG's job is to report back to the king and queen. Does Hamlet want them reporting back to the king and queen, hey, he's pretending to be mad, but he knows what's going on? He probably doesn't want that. I don't know.
My thought is, he is not even thinking that. I think in
Okay.
his joy,
Okay.
when you are drunk with joy, you are blind to other things that you might have. You're blind to your motivation sometimes. You're blind to your own,
And consequences.
Yeah,
You're
thank
blind
you.
to consequences.
Yeah, you're blind to ambition and consequences. It's like,
Yeah.
you're mad at someone, and then your wife comes, or your favorite woman comes, or man, depending who you are, or animal, if you're into that. And then you're just like, hey, this is great. It's great. Yeah, you're good. You guys are good.
Yeah, it's
I'm just
true.
kind of crazy. You know what I mean? It's just like, because
Yeah.
he had previously said to them that I'm going to put on a front for the players, but I'm not. I'm going to explain to you the show I'm putting on for you now as compared with the show that I'm going to give to the players. And
Yeah,
so
it's
he's making
interesting.
reference to that. So it's because he's not, in terms of how he's acting with Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, he's not acting mad at all. He doesn't say anything that's too, aside, he says Denmark's a prison. Well, that's a little dour, but it's not
Yeah, but it's
mad.
true. It's how he feels, right?
Right. But it's not like crazy, like Denmark
No.
is a flying machine built in the future. Like, wait a minute.
Right. It's not.
And Michael
It's
J.
not how
Fox
he
is in
acts
it.
with. It's not how he acts with Polonius.
No, exactly. So they have no reason. He has no reason to tell them he's not mad. I think but
Okay.
I think also he is in his own world at this point, and it's. I think both the line itself and the placement is so beautiful.
And it is, and the line we are talking about. But my uncle father and aunt mother, which, sorry to interrupt the line here, which is brilliant in itself, that he not only realizes but is poking fun at. It's almost this meta view of his situation. But my uncle father and aunt mother are deceived. The Guildenstern says, yeah, deceived, yes. And in what, my lord? I am but mad northwest. When the wind is southerly, I know a hawk from a handsaw. It's still kind of cryptic in itself a little bit. He doesn't come right out and say it, but in a way, I guess it could be interpreted either way from Guildenstern or Rosencrantz, but he is saying to them, yeah, sometimes you can call me crazy, but I know what's going on. It's such a great, and right before, the timing is great too, right before the entrance of Polonius, RNG don't get a chance to follow up, to ask that follow-up question. Like, so what do you mean?
Right.
Yeah, they don't get it.
Because I was thinking, do they understand that?
Right. Do they? Well,
what
it's
is their
great
thought
because,
to
well,
that?
we're gonna see in a scene coming up that they report back to the king and queen something very different than what really happened in the scene.
Yeah.
So it's great. Yes,
Yeah.
good question. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So yes, he is giddy at the fact that the players are coming, and all of that is very good intel for if you are playing the character of Hamlet, to take note of how he feels about actors and theater. It's a theme over and over again, and there's really good kind of clues there to who this character is. So Polonius comes walking. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
It's also, here we are well into tail end, the final third of Act 2, Scene 2. It's the first time we're seeing Hamlet full of joy. He's a character that otherwise is filled with sorrow and anger and just kind of, suicidal thoughts, and like, oh, this is a different side of Hamlet that we've never seen.
That's a very good point, because if people are watching this going into the production, it is smart to point out the fact that any chance you get to show the audience who Hamlet was before his father died, you have to take advantage of that. His relationship with Ophelia, any little nugget you can get. And I think you make a good point. Him getting lost in the world of the players, lost in the world of theater, removed from Denmark and Elsinore for a moment, and just in this world of the theater, gives you a sense of who this kid might have been before his father died. And I think that's important. Yeah.
And so
Polonius comes bolting in. you know,
let's go through this text. Gentlemen, you are welcome to Elsinore.
yes,
Your hands come then. The opportunists of welcome is fashion and ceremony. Let me comply with you in this garb, lest my extent to the players, which I tell you must show fairly outwards, should more appear like entertainment than yours. Beautiful.
So good.
I know.
It's so good.
It's beautiful.
It's so good.
He's like, I mean, he says, Hamlet says some interesting things, but he is making it as plain as day what's going on. He's telling them.
I've always felt that was a bit of like, I think his reaction to the players is honest and genuine, but I feel like he's saying a little bit to Rosencrantz, like, hey, don't get your feelings hurt if I'm more excited to see them as I am to you, because I just have to put on this show. When in fact, he genuinely is more excited. It's great.
Yes. You know, and then he follows that, you know, and then, you know, he already said the first line, gentlemen, you are welcome. So he says again, I tell you must show fairly outwards, more appear like entertainment than yours. You are welcome. He says it again. You are welcome.
Yeah.
But then he adds, my uncle, father, and mother are deceived. And of course, in what, my dear Lord, it's, you know, Rosencrantz, I don't know, Rosencrantz is sleeping. Rosencrantz is still kind of like, it's the players, I am just not interested.
Yeah,
you know,
right.
Or he's taking copious notes. Something is happening here.
Rosencrantz was really driving that last, you know, Rosencrantz had all the information about the players in that last scene.
Yes.
So now he just totally missed that my uncle, father, aunt, mother are deceived. He was like, oh, okay, cool. And Guildenstern's like, wait, what? What do you mean by that?
And what, my dear Lord? And then he has that beautiful line, I am but mad, northwest when the wind is southerly. I know a hawk from a handsaw, which I very often badly misquote. I've been misquoting that line for years. I would say a hem from a hacksaw. I kid you not. I shouldn't say this on camera, but yes, it's bad. But then again, I say it to someone who has no clue what I'm talking about, so it all works out, you know?
So you get your point across.
Yeah, my apologies to the bard, but I should know that line better. And then, so as you mentioned before, then of course enter the fun guy, the guy who gets it, Polonius.
So, so the idea is that like the players entered at some, I don't know, some outside door place, and Polonius greeted them, and Polonius is taking the message in, right? That's kind of the idea, right? Rather than the players just walking right in.
Correct.
Okay. Well be with you, gentlemen. So Hamlet sees Polonius and immediately goes into this playful, maybe it's the antic disposition, but I have a feeling that Hamlet kind of always played word games and played games with Polonius because Polonius can keep up with him. So immediately he locks into, let's play a little joke on the old guy. Right?
He does. He's still in mirth, but it's a little bit of a touch of cruelty, a touch of play.
Yes, and because Polonius can handle it, and Polonius does handle it. Polonius always handles it, except for a knife through an arras. Other than that,
no, he was good with that too.
It.
Oh, he got away. I don't know if you saw Polonius, the sequel, Polonius. He's on an island somewhere saying, that arras saved my life. And he's selling bulletproof arrases and knife-proof arrases all across the Bahamas.
Smart. So when Polonius comes in, this was one of my favorite bits too. There's room in here right now to add comedy. Once you have kind of decided on who you think Guildenstern and Rosencrantz are, it's up to you in the production. But I remember having so much fun with this. I would say, I think in the first production I did, I would say, hark you, Guildenstern. And I would take Guildenstern across to the other side of the stage, meaning both of them. And then Rosencrantz would stay over there, and then I would have to look up and go, and you too, like dummy, come like, you know, because you too is a little odd. I mean, not Bono, you too, but the line you too is a little odd.
I haven't even heard their last album, but it is very odd. If you ask me. The country and Western music is very.
We would lean into that, and then they would both come to one side, and then I would say, at each ear a hear, like split up guys, that whole thing. And then that great baby you see there is not yet out of his swaddling clouts, referring to Polonius. And then Rosencrantz, I remember at this point we had established that Rosencrantz kind of would always try to make a joke and it would fail. Happily, he is the second time come to them, for they say an old man is twice a child. And Guildenstern and I both would just pause and stare at him. And just like the joke would just kind of, you know what I mean? So the opportunities are there if you decide that Rosencrantz is that guy, right? Because no one responds to his joke.
I love that.
But anyways, the opportunities are there. Yeah.
Because I was going to ask you about that. You've answered that question for me.
Well, I think it's what we said last episode, that it is important to differentiate between the two. I think there's a little joke to be had in the fact that you can't tell the two of them apart, but that doesn't travel. That doesn't get you much. What gets you a lot is to differentiate between the two. Get you, you can earn more miles out of that. Anyway, so that's some of the opportunities there.
I think you get also mileage, flight mileage when you do that as well.
You do. Yeah. If you use your credit card.
Yeah, I know I got TWA airline points when we did Hamlet again. Unfortunately, TWA went out of business about 30 years ago, so it did me no good, but I appreciated the effort. So Rosencrantz, I think in terms of what we're doing now, we've kind of established, we're in sort of unofficial agreement that Rosencrantz is the dimmer of the two.
Yes,
for some reason is the most knowledgeable about the players. Seems to be, can go on about the players.
Yeah.
And so after Rosencrantz makes that terrible joke, happily is the second time come to them where they say an old man is twice a child.
Right. Rosencrantz probably laughs at his own joke. The other two guys not laughing at all.
Yes. But then Hamlet then turns to them as if we're in it together. And he says, I will prophecy comes to tell me of the players market. Like, we're going to be in a joke, all of us together. Mm-hmm. And then I love that he goes right into like his version of a regular conversation. Oh, you say right, sir, on Monday morning? Was that indeed like was that regular talk back then?
No. You know, I gotta say this. Okay, I'm admitting something here that maybe I shouldn't admit. The first time I did this was in 2003. I was 25 years old, and I remember reading that line. You say right, sir. Monday morning was indeed. And my first thought was, wow, they had a Monday, like back in 1603, they named the day Monday. Like, I was like, how long have days of the weeks been named? And I remember thinking, at what point, how far in history, 1300s, 1200, like, did they do Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday? Those names just don't sound that archaic to me, but I guess Monday's been around a long time.
Since the Roman Empire, I believe.
Pretty yes, great. Okay, anyway, that was my thought as a 25-year-old.
Yeah. But it's a thought that I'm thinking maybe I should research, because it is an interesting thought.
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know.
Like that, at least stuff.
And stuff, yeah. And poo.
Yeah, poo.
Yeah. Right. So you say right, sir. It was Monday morning indeed. So now Hamlet's putting on a bit of a show. Also, anytime that you can show Hamlet acting or putting on a show, I would lean into that as well.
By the way, that's all of Hamlet. You know?
Yeah.
He's always putting on a show. You know, aside from the soliloquy.
That's a good point. Until he comes back from England, and then you have a chance to show a Hamlet that just cuts right to the truth. So if you set up this Hamlet that thinks and questions and puts on shows and thinks on parallel levels, and then you come back from England and it is not a wit, we defy augury, you know, all that kind of stuff. If it be now, 'tis not to come. That's a different guy. So you got to be aware of where it's going. So I love that. 'Twas Monday morning. 'Twas that indeed. My lord, I have news to tell you. So talk to me about Polonius coming into this scene. We're going to find out later that he doesn't have a very high opinion of these actors, but perhaps because of his last engagement with Hamlet, he thinks this is a good thing for Hamlet. I don't know. What is Polonius's mindset coming in?
Well, an opportunity. What do we know about Hamlet in terms of Polonius? We know he's heir to the throne.
That's a good thing not to forget. I think people forget that he's a prince.
Yes.
I think sometimes productions forget that. That's very good.
Exactly. And because Polonius' specialty, his bread and butter is making these grand presentations to royalty. This is another opportunity to, I've got something, I've got a gift for the future king, something that's I know that he enjoys. Not very good, but he's gonna dig him. I'm telling you, and it's gonna lift his spirits because I know he's mad for my daughter, et cetera, et cetera. So this is something that will distract him. So, my lord, I have news to tell you. This is like, yes, of course, he's completely clueless about what's going on. But you know what? In his own world, things are great. And so, with that in mind, he bursts on in.
I think that's great. I think that's a great choice for that. Right. If you're keeping in mind Polonius's MO and what he's trying to do. Yeah, I think you're right. So, my lord, I have news to tell you. Hamlet goes right into kind of, it's almost like continuation of Fishmonger a little bit, right?
Yes.
The kind of teasing and, okay, my lord, I have news to tell you. When Roscius was an actor in Rome, the only thing I've ever made of that line is that he just gets out the word actor before Polonius does. I don't know what else that is.
I think there was a reference to, let's see, there was an actor named Roscius in the 1st century.
Right.
And so I guess this is another case of just using historical fact or just using anything to fuck with Polonius, of course. And also, since he knows already what Polonius is going to say,
he's preempting a little bit. Yeah.
No, I was going to say Hamlet is clairvoyant. It's in Act 6. I don't know if you read Act 6. He talk about
clairvoyant Hamlet.
he can levitate things. It's something to do with the other world. I don't know.
Amazing.
But yes, so he's playing. Even Hamlet and Polonius have the same word games and have arguably equal intelligence. I think Polonius, the one thing that Hamlet, among the many things that Hamlet has that Polonius does not have, is that he has a cynicism and a questioning of authority, and a little bit of cruelty in that playfulness. And Polonius, he is stern, but he is obedient and he's loyal, and he probably has no sense of humor. He's pretty strict and obedient. So it's basically Hamlet going for the juggler. I
think that's a good point. I think what you just said is a great place to start in rehearsals is give Polonius the same intelligence as Hamlet, the same ability to wordplay, but possibly less of a sense of humor. And I think that's a great place to start. I think that's really smart. Instead of going in, as you and I have a pet peeve of Polonius is the buffoon, it gets you nowhere. It just gets you nowhere. I think he shows time and time again that his wordplay can keep up with Hamlet. Not as quite as good as the Gravedigger can, which is great, which is a reason why Shakespeare made kind of the lowest ranking person. But there's definitely a back and forth. It's got to be a two-way street. It's got to be a tennis match between Polonius and Hamlet, or why have those scenes of Hamlet just beating up on Polonius? Doesn't make any sense.
Also, another difference too is that in terms of relationships, Polonius is obsequious to a fault. The king, Claudius, Gertrude, Hamlet, they can say whatever they want to him, and he has to suck it up. And he spent his life doing this. So when Hamlet, as the next line comes up, so he says "buzz, buzz" to him. You can't be more rude than that in the 16th century. And he's like, and yet Polonius has no choice, as his trading as the king's hand, as is trading my royalty. You ignore the slights and you continue the fights. Yes, I just made that up. It's stupid. I don't know why I just said that. But nonetheless,
did you just make that up? That's pretty good because it rhymes. If you can make up something that rhymes, it doesn't matter if it makes sense or not.
Someone write this down. But I am a clown. Now I can't stop rhyming. Anyway.
No, I think you're right. It's funny because that buzz in my experience has always been difficult I didn't quite, because I had respect for Polonius when I always played Hamlet. I would throw buzz to RNG as if saying, "Ooh, wow, this is news." I just throwing it straight to Polonius as if making fun of him just never felt right.
No, that makes
it was
sense.
it was a bit much. And then Polonius, upon my honor, then came each actor on his ass, which a lot of these editions that I read say that is some first line of an old ballad somewhere. He's quoting something there, which, listen, modern audiences aren't going to know that. They're not going to know that reference. So you have to give some kind of justification for that line.
Is that line often cut? I don't
That's
remember
a good question.
that line.
I've used it, but I don't. Yeah, it probably is. You're probably right. Yeah,
because is not familiar to me.
Now tell me about the next bit. I mean, I have an idea of what. Listen, it can be played so many different ways as far as Polonius giving the introduction that the actors want him to give. Perhaps it's written on their program. Perhaps it's Polonius getting Hamlet excited about. I don't know. Just later on, we're going to see that Polonius doesn't hold the actors in a very high regard. So what is this next speech for you?
I wonder if it's when Polonius, as in, my liege and madam to expostulate, when Polonius, as seasoned as he is with royalty, he also has some trepidation about it, nervous about it. And I think that if he's put on the defensive, or if he's scared to tell them something, he will go into his own mind and we'll see, him expostulate what's going on inside. So he's kind of, instead of saying, these guys are really good, Hamlet, he's saying, well, they're the best for everything: tragedy, comedy, history, pastoral, historical, pastoral. This is part of his show. And if someone is saying boo, as Hamlet is doing, he's got to pivot on that, and try to still put on that show.
So this is coming off the kind of buzz. You're saying this is a reaction to buzz.
Yes, because otherwise.
Oh, that's good. I've never thought of that before. Oh, that's good. So Hamlet's making Polonius work for this, and Polonius is up to the challenge.
Right. I mean, I think so. Because I don't think he would have said that had Hamlet not put him on the defense about his words. Particularly when you're saying buzz, this is old news. He goes, no, it's the best actors in the world for tragedy, comedy, history, pastoral, comical, historical, pastoral, tragical, historical. I mean, he's like filibustering Hamlet.
Yes, right.
Like, you can't say no to this. For the writ and the liberty, these are the best men. What are you crazy? This is the best.
That's pretty great. I like that. There's a note in this Arden here that I've never seen before that says it's referring to tragical historical, and apparently the first play to be designated on its title page as tragical historical, or the tragical history, was the tragical history of Hamlet. So that was an invented phrase for Hamlet, and he uses it in the play.
I mean, if you look through the entire text of this little mini speech, Polonius is covering all bases. Because after he says the best act in the world is either for tragedy, comedy, history, pastoral, comical, historical, pastoral, tragical, historical, tragical, comical, historical, pastoral, scene in, is it indivisible or indivisible?
Indivisible. Individual. Let's see, where is it? Scene indivisible. Yeah.
Scene indivisible or poem unlimited. Seneca cannot be too heavy, nor Plautus too light for the law of writ and the liberty. These are the only men. I have covered the entire spectrum of performing arts.
And I would like to think that initially it was just tragedy, comedy, history, pastoral. And then what we know of Polonius's mind took him down the rest of the roads. Yes. Also, as a note, Poem Unlimited is the name of the Harold Bloom book that followed up. So he wrote Invention of the Human, which is about has a chapter as every single Shakespeare play. but he felt like he didn't talk enough about Hamlet. So he wrote an edition, kind of a companion book called Poem Unlimited about Hamlet, which is very interesting.
I like
Yeah.
that.
Yeah, it's pretty cool.
Did you ever read that book? I think I forget the author was. I think it's called Seneca Was Too Heavy, and Here's Why.
Yes.
I don't know.
Yeah.
It was very. In fact, the book itself was very. It was like 900 pounds. No one could lift it. Well, of course, the last book was like that. But anyway,
and back to the antithesis that we've been talking about. Seneca not too heavy, Plautus too light. The law of writ and liberty, meaning following the rules, not following the rules, like balancing everything out. So then Hamlet goes into this, again, antic disposition, which this gets cut a lot.
Always.
And I think rightly so, because I really love the fact that Polonius introduces the actors with, these are the only men, and then they enter the stage. But this is, O Jephthah, judge of Israel, what a treasure hast thou, what a treasure had he, my lord. Why? One fair daughter and no more. So he starts to quote this sonnet, this poem, this literature. And again, I do love the Polonius aside, still on my daughter aside again to the audience. It's great. It's great.
But and the poem, the one fair daughter and no more, the which he loved passing well, that's from a specific poem?
Well, listen, this is not coming from me. It's coming from the text that I've read in the notes. That yes, he's quoting some archaic poem. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. But it boils down to a bit of antic disposition, right?
It's most curious antic disposition because he's like doubling down. Like first he's playing with him, and then he starts calling him, Jephthah, judge of Israel. Like, why that? Of all things, anybody ever called you Jephthah?
Yeah, no, I think because the poem refers to a man who loved his daughter so much, he ended up killing her or something.
Oh, right.
Yeah. That's what it goes on
Jephthah,
to.
because of a rash vow, had to sacrifice his daughter.
Yes.
Hamlet goes on to sing lines from a popular ballad based on Jephthah's story. Oh, so there you go.
So it's just
I'm on to you, brother. I know what you're doing. I know, my cards have been discarded by Ophelia, and I had to do that nunnery thing. Thanks, pal.
Wow. He is omniscient. So this is a bit of nay. So then he says, you call me Jephthah, my lord. I have a daughter that I love passing well. Nay, that follows not. What follows then? Why? As by lot God what? And then it came to pass, and most like it was. And then he says the first row of the Pyrrhus Jansen will show you more, for look where my abridgment comes. Meaning, like, look to the poem, look to the ballad, and you'll figure out where I'm going. But the players are coming, so I've got to stop.
I'm gonna start using that line, for look where my abridgment comes. No one's gonna get it, but it works.
But it can work right in the middle of a conversation. As someone is talking to you and you want to get away, just say, look where my abridgment comes, and just walk away.
And the as by lot God what, it's such curious dialogue. Always, isn't it often cut? I never seen as by lot God what.
I think maybe Brennan was the only person who ever did it. Yeah, in his complete work. Well, I mean but it also kind of compares a little bit to, which I've said before, I eat the air, promise crammed, you cannot feed capon. So what the, But yes, if you want to use it as antic disposition, it works well for that. But again, I like Polonius saying these are the only men, and then enter the players. I think that's a good cut.
And just a quick aside. So doesn't it fascinate you, Shakespeare? Our most beloved, international poet, our most beloved international playwright. At the same token, he's the only playwright that we happily edit, that we happily, delete, that we happily discard.
Yeah.
So
it's a good topic to discuss. I think maybe because it comes from evidence that he edited himself constantly, that things show up in different versions of plays that don't show up in other plays. Like, in other words, if we had Sam Shepard's Buried Child and we had 3 different versions of it, I think we would feel better cutting certain pieces of it and inserting other pieces of it. That's the only thing I can make of it, but it's a very good point to make.
Yeah, it's just this Trish, but yeah, you're right. You're right. I mean, we have that example with Glass Menagerie, don't we?
That's a great example as
Yeah.
two very different versions. That opening monologue is different in those two versions. I think maybe the closing monologue as well, but and even the argument with his mother scene is very different in both of those versions. And you are supported which either one you want to do. Yeah. But yeah,
Yeah.
I think it's a good point. Yeah, it's a good point. Yeah. Okay, so then the players enter, and as we said before, we get to see some joy from Hamlet. And if you are playing Hamlet, you get to show the audience maybe who you were before your father died. And if you are the actor feels joy and excitement because there's just a flourish of excitement and probably color and noise and just a entirely different feel than we've seen from the play the entire
Yes.
time. And it's about time because we're well, it depends on the play, but usually about an hour and a half into the play. We're an hour and a half into the evening, and there is a jolt of excitement that just entered.
And hour and a half. That's a entire movies are 90 minutes. At times, entire plays are 90 minutes. It's a hefty chunk of time, particularly if you're watching a bad production. But if you're watching a good production,
yes, right,
so
yeah.
Why don't you read us this lovely passage
Yeah.
that Hamlet greets the players
Yes.
with?
You are welcome, masters. Welcome all. I'm glad to see thee well. Welcome, good friends. Oh, old friend, why thy face is balanced since I saw thee last. Comest thou to beard me in Denmark? What, my young lady and mistress? By your ladyship is nearer to heaven than when I saw you last by the altitude of a Chopin. Pray God, your voice, like a piece of uncurrent gold, be not cracked within the ring. Masters, you are welcome. You are all welcome. Well, e'en to it like French falconers fly at anything we see. We'll have a speech straight. Come, give us a taste of your quality. Come, a passionate speech. I mean, he just runs on with excitement. How many times does he say the word welcome? I think 4.
I know. Welcome is right. I mean, he does it. Yeah, he does it with RNG. Stunning. I mean, and it feels like in East Passage he has to mention it twice. Again, the double welcome, enthusiasm. Joy. Only a foolish, happy person would say welcome twice.
Right.
You only welcome someone twice. Yeah, I mean once.
Yeah.
So I'm un-Freudian slipping. So I love that he is being specific about the players themselves. The one who was the castrato or someone that is getting a little bigger, what have you. He's mentioning.
Yeah.
Of course, they're all men back then.
Yeah. That's why I love. He says, "Pray God, like a piece of current gold to your voice line." Because as soon as the young boy's voice cracked, he can no longer play the female roles. Yes. I love that. Yeah.
And so, first player responds, "What speech, my lord?"
And so here is, and this is so fun. This is another one of those whole moments that you can lean into because it's unexpected. Because when people come to see Hamlet, they expect to be or not to be. They expect maybe the sword fight at the end. They expect all this stuff. What they don't expect is the character to get up, try to recite a monologue, screw it up, get a little embarrassed. It's so fun because you can feel the audience not know this part of the play very well. And you can really lean into it. So he says,
yes.
I heard, and it's very telling of the character too. I heard thee speak me a speech once, but it was never acted, or if it was, not above once. For the play, I remember, please not the million, 'twas caviar to the general, but it was, as I received it, and others whose judgments in such matters cried in the top of mine, an excellent play, well digested in the scenes, set down with as much modesty as cunning. I remember one said there was no salads in the lines to make the matter savory, nor no matter in the phrase that might indict the author of affection, but called it an honest method, all wholesome as sweet, and by very much more handsome than fine. One speech in it I chiefly loved, 'twas Aeneas' tale to Dido, and thereabout of it, especially when he speaks of Priam's slaughter. If it live in your memory, begin at this line, let me see, let me see. Okay, so much there that tells us something about Hamlet. First of all, we're about to see that he remembers monologues. He remembers long passages of plays. And it's also partly, you can't help but think it's Shakespeare speaking to his critics a little bit. Like,
Yes.
oh, one person said this about it and said this about it, but the general public hated it. They didn't get it. It's interesting. I love this whole section.
The other thing it says about Hamlet, it says, more than a patron of the arts, he's someone that, he's almost an indirect participant in the arts. He has such a feeling and passion for theater and for acting. And of course, it makes sense because what is he doing almost the entire play, but acting, putting on a show? That's why Hamlet is the ultimate player's play. It's a play within a play within a play. And, and so, and this is Shakespeare as the actor. For probably the only time that I can recall in any of the plays that I've read of his, that he's professing his love of performance and acting and style and what he likes.
Yeah, it sounds right from the mouth of Shakespeare, doesn't it? This whole section sounds, it's Shakespeare's love letter to the theater, a little bit, not to overstate it. But the fact that not only Hamlet remembers the lines, but he remembers what critics said about it. He remembers the reception of the general public. It's pretty great.
I know. It's like, whoa, that's a lot. Weren't you doing like princely kind of stuff back then? Or weren't you at Wittenmark or whatever? What the hell? What kind of theater they got Wittenmark? So a lot of questions. I guess he was doing that and practicing his sword fighting at the same time while
right.
writing a review in the Post.
And this is great. And he wants to act it out a little bit. He wants to try his hand at it, which is fun. And he depending upon how you play it, he fails miserably or he's quite good at whatever it is. It depends, but he wants to try his hand at it. It's great.
And you know why? Because only a fool full of joy would say, let me try. I've never operated, never done brain surgery. But what the hell? I'm in a great mood. Let's just do this, Like, oh, okay. I said I was new. I mean, so that's it. It makes sense. He right now at this moment, his confidence is sky high. I almost feel Claudius in that room, he would break out a bazooka out of nowhere. Like, what is this blunt instrument? And then maybe hit him over the head with an understanding that you shoot it like a gun. But he's kind of like he feels that empowered by it.
Oh yes, the lost bazooka scene.
Yeah.
So I think, okay, so this is giving me a new kind of overarching idea to this, is lean into the joy of Hamlet, the feeling that Hamlet has of joy when the players arrive. I think that's a great place to start because it really is. It's that almost drunk joy.
I feel like if Ophelia walked in, he'd be smothering her with kisses and say, I apologize for that nunnery business. It's in the text. So otherwise I would not have said it. Like, it just, have you ever been that happy where you just sort of like, I can do anything. I'm feeling great. And like, it's just like, beauty is everywhere.
Well, I think you and I feel this way about the theater in general. And it's no coincidence that it's the players that cue that feeling for him, right? It's being in the theater. There's it reminds me of that great quote that theater is more artificial than real life, but more truthful at the same time. And I love that because our artificial in the way of sets and costumes and blah, 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 but truthful in the fact that it gets right to the truth of the things that we don't want to talk about in real life. God, I just love that. And that's I think why you and I both love the theater.
Absolutely. And love the truths that Shakespeare was so wonderfully talented at getting at. That he, in the 16th and 17th century was able to touch upon. It is pretty incredible. And so he begins his version of this scene.
Yes. Yeah.
The rugged Pyrrhus, like the Hyrcanian beast. Am I mispronouncing that? Probably.
I think Hyrcanian.
Anyway, probably sounds right. The rugged Pyrrhus, like the Hyrcanian beast, is not so. It begins with Pyrrhus. The rugged Pyrrhus, he whose sable arms, black as his purpose, did the knight resemble when he lay couched in the ominous horse, hath now this dread and black complexion smeared with heraldry more dismal head to foot. Now is he total gules?
I think, yeah, I think it's gules. I think that's a, from what I remember when it comes to heraldry, it's a dark red color resembling blood.
Yes, I did look it up, but I didn't look up the pronunciation. Now he's in total gules, hardly tricked with blood of fathers, mothers, daughters, sons, baked and impasted with the parching streaks that lend a tyrannous and damned lights to their lord's murder, roasted in wrath and fire, and thus oversized with coagulate gore, with eyes like carbuncles, the hellish Pirish, O grandsire Priam seeks, so proceed. You know,
hey, for God, my lord, well spoken with good accent and good direction. Oh, that's also the next line. I was just saying that to you. Oh, okay.
No,
that's also, yeah, that was quite good, Paul. That was quite good.
No, but yeah, it's. But I love that he goes from, you know, he does what he remembers. I feel. Then he goes, and then and then so on. And Polonius, again, is he sincere? I don't know. When he says, for God, my lord, well spoken with good accent and good discretion. What does it say about Polonius? He claims to be a man of the theater. These are two theater fans, two theater geeks.
Yeah, that's the question that's going to come up later when Polonius says, "Look how there's tears in his eyes," and I think, yeah, does Polonius not know what acting is? Like, that's going to come up later.
I think, right. Well, remember, this is a guy that sadly, brilliant, yes, has no sense of humor. So what does that tell you with someone that doesn't have a sense of humor? He's a very kind of narrow-minded individual, and he has a bit of blinders on. So he does not understand acting. So it doesn't
but we're going to find out. We're going to find out later. He played Julius Caesar, though.
Yes, so I know, but I guess he did the completely emotionless Julius Caesar.
That's why they killed him. That's why it was perfect for Julius Caesar.
Yes.
So Hamlet recites this speech, and again, it's the opportunity. It's up to the actor, the director. Is Hamlet quite good at it? Perhaps he is good at it. Or I've seen some productions exploit the idea that he's quite bad at it. And it's very funny to see a bad actor. Whatever you want. The opportunities are there. We don't know if Hamlet is good at this or not. We do know he is memorized, or somehow it has stuck with him.
It's memorized.
And we're going to find out, I think, a little bit later, why this particular speech. This is not just a random speech. There's a very particular reason why it's this one.
M-O-M.
Oh, could be. Yeah. That too. I wasn't thinking that, but that's pretty good too. Yeah.
But also, I love that in Polonius's praise, it's very specific. Well-spoken with good accent and good, like, it's so specific, this praise. It's not like, very good, my lord, that's very impressive. He's like, it's so precise. Like, this is a man who thinks he knows the theater. And that, and that he can be very precise about his thoughts on specific this, that, or the other. And he's never seen Hamlet, this side of Hamlet before. So the actor playing.
Yeah, so I think I would, at least in rehearsal, I would start with it being genuine. I would start with it being real. That's where I would start, unless you find a better reason, because then everything else, Moblid Queen, this is too long, all that's genuine too. And so I would start that way. Yeah.
I definitely, with Polonius especially, because he doesn't have that. He has no sarcasm in Polonius, as far as I know.
Yeah, I think true. Now, when we did this, did we do that? Did we do For God? I know we did. This is too long, because that was very funny. Did we do For God, my lord, well spoken with good accent, good direction?
We did not.
We did not. What did we do? We cut that. Yeah,
we cut that completely. Yeah.
Okay. We were trying to do a less than 2 hour version.
Yes.
So then first player stands up and picks right up. I love this speech. Anon he finds him striking too short at Greeks, His antique sword, rebellious to his arm, lies where it falls, repugnant to command, unequal matched. Pyrrhus at Priam drives, in rage strikes wide, but with the whiff and wind of his fell sword, the unnerved father falls. Then senseless Ilium, seeming to feel this blow, with flaming top stoops to his base, and with a hideous crash takes prisoner Pyrrhus's ear. For lo, his sword, which was declining on the milky head of Reverend Priam, seemed in the air to stick. So as a painted tyrant, Pyrrhus stood, and like a neutral to his will and matter, did nothing. So that kind of what resonates for me, as a neutral to his will and matter, did nothing, which is a place where Hamlet is right now. It's someone, a venue, because Priam is killing Pyrrhus because Pyrrhus killed Priam's father, who is Achilles. So in this moment of revenging his father's death, he delays, he hesitates. And it's kind of what Hamlet is going through at the moment.
It's funny. It almost functions like a dumb play in a way.
Yes. Right. I always had this idea, and I don't know that I could ever pull it off, but that in acting this out, the sword over the head about to kill is exactly replicated when Hamlet is over Claudius in the church. Right. So we kind of see that happen. But
except of course the Scythe.
Oh, jeez. Oh,
sorry,
this guy.
Viewers.
So right here, when I edit this right here, I'm going to put up a picture right now of the San Diego production of the Sky, so you know what we're talking about. Okay. So
continue. And by the way, in our production of Hamlet, after did nothing is when you had Polonius say this is too long.
Yeah, I think so, because it was up in the air. Yeah, right.
But it goes on much longer.
It does go on much longer. It's a lot like the player king and player queens lines that really go on a long time if you're trying to trim some time. But as we often see against some storm, a silence in the heavens, the rack stands still, the bold winds speechless, and the orb below as hush as death. Anon the dreadful thunder doth rend the region. So after Pyrrhus's pause, aroused vengeance sets him new a work, and never did the Cyclops hammer fall on Mars' armor forged for proof a turn with less remorse than Pyrrhus's bleeding sword now falls on Priam. Out, thou strumpet fortune, all you gods. In general, I can't even see that. What does that
Syriad?
say? Oh, yeah, that's it. Syriad, yeah. In general, Syriad, take away her power, break all the spokes. And is that Feli? What is that?
Felis. I have Felis.
Felis. Okay. From her wheel. Oh, that's right. From the wheel, and bowl the round, nape down the hill of heaven, and lo, as to the fiends. Yes. And this is too long, which is great, because that is a good place for Polonius to interrupt. Yes.
And it's true.
Yes, it does go on a bit. Yeah, this is too long. And Hamlet, it shall to the barbers with your beard. Meaning, is that line saying it is the it in that line the speech? It shall to the barbers. In other words, we'll take the speech to the barbers to cut, and with your beard.
With your beard. Yes.
Okay. It shall to the barber. Not like it shall, meaning your beard shall go to the barbers. It meaning the speech. So Hamlet's kind of agreeing with him a bit, going like, it shall to the barbers with your beard. Or not agreeing with him, but saying the speech, referring to the speech. Prithee, say on, he's for a jig or a tale of bawdry, or he sleeps. Again, that just feels like Shakespeare taking it out on his audience a little bit. Like anytime I try to get serious, they fall asleep. They want something sexual and something drunk, or they fall asleep. That just feels like a writer saying that to me.
That's true.
Yeah. And then here we go. This is kind of what you were referring to earlier, I think. Come
Yes.
to Hecuba. It's why he wants to get to the heart of it. He wants to get to Hecuba. And the first player, but who, woe, had seen the Moblid Queen. The Moblid Queen. And then this is great. Now, in my version, unfortunately, in the Arden, just has that's good. What do you have in yours?
I have that's good parentheses. Mobile Queen is good, which I love.
I do
If
too.
you, yeah, because it's so specific, and for me, it's in sync with Polonius in terms of his relationship with Gertrude.
Yeah, it is. I think from what we have discovered when we were talking about the last scene in their relationship,
Oh yeah,
which I gotta say, I never realized before. I think it's a great insight. Really good of him to go, oh, that's good. Although, what is moblid, muffled, whatever it is in different texts, what I'm asking you, what does it mean? But will a modern audience even know what that means?
definitely not.
Okay.
But right, it's a good point. Even if you sell it, really sell it, if you have the actor playing Polonius really sell it, yeah, that's good. Mobile Queen is good. Yeah, you can have them acted out, but what's the point? It's a tough call if you're putting on Hamlet because you want the audience to understand what's going on. Yeah, but you also don't want to placate them. You also want to
Right.
elevate their experience. And so
I think I tend to trust that they get that represents the only queen that we've talked about in this play already. So when we say Moblid Queen, Hamlet says Moblid Queen, and then it's repeated again by Polonius. I think we can't help but make that connection. Even if we don't know what Moblid means, we know that the two of these people are referring to the other queen in the play.
right, absolutely. I mean, there's another line Polonius says, I feared I had not coded him. And they're not going to know what coded means. Coded means to
Right.
investigate, but they'll get enough.
Yes.
I always feel like you're at an advantage if you play up to the audience as opposed to playing down, because that lifts them up as well, and they'll want to be there with you. They'll want to, even if they don't fully understand, they'll want to understand.
I think you're right. It's a director I used to work with always said, encourage active listening.
Yes.
And I think it's those things where you don't play down to them and you just say, look, if you listen actively, you're going to get it. You're going to get it.
And if you don't, you'll be inspired to understand it. We are putting on, if you're putting on a 17th century, 16th century play, that's already just that alone. If they're coming to see that, you got to give them that.
Great. Good point.
I mean, we had an actor when they remain nameless that made suggestions that we do the opposite of that we change some text. Right. Of course, it's just no, you don't want to do that. If they're going to see Shakespeare, they're not going to see, they're not seeing Transformers 2. They're watching live theater. They're watching, even though they may not know what blank verse is, but they're watching something different. You got to make them work. You got to make them work, but not in an unpleasant way, in a genuine way.
And then they are part of it.
Yes.
Right. Yeah.
Yes.
Then you are requiring them to be a part of it and not just saying, hey, sit back and I'll just throw a bunch of stuff at the wall and see what sticks. No, you need to be a part of it. You need to meet me halfway. And I like that relationship between actor and audience. Yeah.
And, the mistake that you had mentioned several times with British actor who we saw on stage, who did a lot of indicating, is that it helps neither the educated nor the ignorant, because it plays down. It is a disservice to the text, which is everything, and it's an insult to the audience, because let them watch and listen. Don't point them where they need to go. Don't change a text just because, well, we don't want to alienate the audience. Well, you know what? Don't put on Shakespeare then, okay? Put on another
Yeah, if you're afraid of that,
play.
right.
You know?
And the last thing I'll say here is that a lot of these lines have multiple meanings, and I don't change the line to where it only has one meaning. Let the people in the audience experience it differently, and they hear the word sun. Some hear the bright star in the sky. Some hear the the firstborn of the father. Whatever it is, like that's part of it. That's part of the play, is how they hear it. So, yeah, I think we're on the same page there, and that's part of the beauty of doing Shakespeare today.
Absolutely.
I did like in the Brennan version. I have a feeling you and I will end up watching these film versions and doing an episode on these film versions as well.
Oh,
so
yes.
I won't
wait.
talk too much. I won't talk
Okay.
too much about the Brennan version.
Please don't.
I will say this: as I get older, I appreciate it more. I just appreciate that someone got the funding together and the crew together and the cast together to take this one play and do every word ever written about this one play, whether it's good or not. I appreciate that he went through the trouble to do it. But I do like the fact that he acts out these scenes and does a flashback with Gilgood and Judi Dench. It's pretty interesting. It's kind of cool. Anyway, so Polonius, great. That's good. Mobley Queen is good. Okay, so he's talking about Hecuba now. Run barefoot up and down, threatening the flames with Bissen room, a clout upon the head where late the diadem stood, and for a robe about her lank and all ortine loins, a blanket in the alarm of fear caught up, who this it seen with tongue in venom steeped, against fortune state would treason have pronounced. But if the gods themselves did see her then, when she saw Pyrrhus make malicious sport in mincing with his sword her husband's limbs, the instant burst of clamor that she made, unless things mortal move them not at all, would have made milch the burning eyes of heaven and passion in the gods. Oh my God, that's a good speech. And it's like not even part of the narrative of the play. It's just like a side speech. And it's remarkable.
The interesting thing about it too is that if you want to talk about parallels, so we have in this, of course, parallel to Hamlet's task of avenging his father, sort of in the speech we just heard. But then we have something happen. We have the queen, we have Hecuba, cry out in agony. What does Gertrude do? Does she cry out in agony?
Right.
She does not.
Right.
So it's a moving scene, but also it's filled with irony. You know, it's filled with, it's like, this is a speech I love. This is a speech I love, but here's why. Here's what I want to happen.
Right. There's a reason why Hamlet wants to hear these words right now.
Yeah. Yeah.
God, that's so interesting, because I do that all the time. I have moments in my life where I'm feeling a certain way, and I will go to a certain monologue. I just recently went back and looked at Glass Menagerie, because there are moments in that play, something I was connecting with recently, and I would go back and want to hear those words again because they get to the truth kind of quicker. That's what Hamlet's doing here.
And so, right. So Hamlet, it's Hamlet for the only time in the play, maybe up, even when the play within the play is put on, it's still Hamlet's show. But this is the only time where it's not his show. He's saying, do this and I'm going to watch and I'm going to experience it. So it's one of the few times where we get to see him have someone perform for him, even though it's essentially him pulling the strings. And what's curious, of course, Hamlet's not moved by this speech, but the player is, because he's thinking of the player cries, has the emotional moment because it's a sad story. It's the emotion that Hamlet has not expressed. Sorrow, sure, but he's not crying, he's not in tears. And yet we have this actor, which is again what leads him to the next soliloquy coming up, having actual tears and emotion from a family tragedy. which is also unfolding, you know. So it all
Right.
ties in. And also for the actor playing the player king, you know, it also kind of ties in there too, because you know, it's like, why are you
Yeah.
crying? What's going on? I mean, obviously what's happening in that scene.
Right.
And that's where, and then Polo Coast comes in. He goes, look where he has not turned his color and had tears in his eyes, pray thee no more. So, you know, again, he could be saying that and that he doesn't understand what acting is. Or maybe Polonius is moved by it and doesn't want
Yeah,
to.
I think so. I think so. Or Polonius, up until this point, has thought acting was kind of more clowns, more fun and jokes and costumes. Then all of a sudden it got very real. Acting became very real. And Polonius went, wait a second, like yeah, I'm starting to get goosebumps here. Please, let's stop this.
Which tells the audience that his Julius Caesar was terrible. There's no doubt it was the worst.
Yeah, yes, right. When he was stabbed, oh, I am slain. Yes, right,
yes,
yeah.
pretty much like, oh, I am slain. Next, yeah. So
when he gets killed later behind the arras, he's going to say, oh, that's how I should have played it, and then he's going to.
That's right.
Yeah.
Much.
So yeah, it's great that, and I think you can afford, because if you've been moving things at a pace, which you should have, you can afford some stillness here, and I think it resonates well. And then Hamlet also, as well, for some reason, whatever the opportunity you choose, decides to say, all right, that's enough. I appreciate, that's what I asked you to do. That's what you did. You kind of put yourself on the line there. 'Tis well, I'll have thee speak out the rest of this soon. So there's more to this speech. Wow.
Right.
Good, my lord. Will you see the players well bestowed? Do you hear? Let them be well used, for they are, and I love this, this is a writer in the theater giving his endorsement of the theater. They are the abstract and brief chronicles of the time. After your death, you'd better have a bad epitaph than their ill report while you live. And also, it also shows that, talking about ill report while you live, back then when Shakespeare was writing, it's very much writing about what was going on at the time, right? At the time, it's very, so that's another line to say. And then Polonius refers to, my lord, I will use them according to their desert. Like, I would treat them the way they deserve to be treated.
Well, it's a very curious line because, okay, forgive me, I'm going to admit some severe ignorance. Is dessert 1 S or 2? I thought dessert was 2.
Yeah, it should be, that should be desert.
Yes. So what the hell is he saying? My lord, I'll use them according to their deserts. Like, what? I don't know what that means. What is he saying there?
Yeah, I mean, I think you make a really good point.
Is that supposed to be dessert? But this is like the old English way of spelling dessert with the 1 S thing?
I think it may be. I think, you know what? I'll be honest. I've always heard it dessert. And then later on when Hamlet says whipping and dessert made sense to me. But you're right. I don't, that is not how you spell dessert. That is,
but it also makes so little sense if you say, oh, I use them according to their desert. I think even they'd stop the play and go like, their desert? Oh, I like Mobile Queen. No, but what does the desert part mean?
Yeah, no, I think you're right. Yeah. Yeah, it's true. It's true. I've just always heard it. That's one of those things that I've overlooked because I've always played it the way I heard it. Yeah, you're right. And then okay, so Polonius says, I'm going to treat them the way they deserve to be treated, as according to their status. And Hamlet's like, you know, God's bodkins, man, much better. Yes, they're low in status. They don't make a lot of money. They're traveling players, but you treat them better than that. Use every man after his desert, and who shall escape whipping. That's pretty funny. I like that. Use them after your own honor and dignity. The less they deserve, the more merit is in your bounty. Take them in. Okay, so
I love that line.
Again, And Hamlet flexes his princeness a little bit. What you were referring to earlier is we can't forget that he is still the next in line to be king, for God's sake.
Now, in addition to the double entendre of the whipping and dessert, what does that line mean? Use every man after his dessert, and who shall escape whipping?
In other words, I think it means if you are going to judge every man for everything he's ever done wrong, then everyone deserves punishment. Everyone deserves, like you treat them honorably and don't judge them too harshly, because we all have things that we could be judged harshly on. That's what I always took it as.
But I love well, thank you. The less they deserve, the more merit is in your bounty. Love that.
Yeah, that's pretty good.
Take them in.
That's great. Take them in. Come, sirs, follow him, friends. We'll hear a play tomorrow. Okay, so here's the big thing that I think, it's a slight little thing, but it needs to be clear. The players are traveling players. So they're going from town to town, from place to place, hoping to get hired to do a play. So they show up. Hamlet's like, oh, I love you guys. Do something for me. I do something, but they're still waiting to see, are we going to get hired to do a play? That's why it's not a done deal. So this is, we'll hear a play tomorrow is, yes, we're getting hired to do a play. We get to stay in the castle tonight. That's kind of a moment that I think should be pointed out. Anyways.
Particularly if you're playing the players.
Yes. You're just because you show up, you haven't been hired, you're traveling, you're kind of door-to-door salesman. And he's like, hey, show me how the vacuum works. Here's how the vacuum works, da-da-da. And he goes, I'll buy two. Yes, that's that moment, right?
Did you ever read Harold Bloom's take on the vacuum scene in Hamlet?
Very good.
Yes. It's very swift. I think there was a Hoover involved.
Some say it sucked. I'm not sure how to take that.
That's right. Some say it sucked donkey butts. Some said donkey butt would not fit there. So I don't know. You take it for what you will.
Some say just suck dirt out of the carpet. So then he pulls the first player aside and says, dost thou hear me, old friend? Can you play the murder of Gonzago? Aye, my lord. I love this too, because this was kind of what traveling players did back then. They had multiple shows in their memory, right? And they would show up and say, hey, would you like to hire us? What would you like us to do? Comedy, tragedy, pastoral, history? Like, what would you want us to do? And they'd go, do a history. And they'd all go, all right. And so the night before they'd rush up and then they'd be able to perform. It's pretty great. It's why that first player knew the Priam speech.
Right. Which is not from the murder of Gonzaga.
It is not. That is from something else. Aeneas' tale to Dido. Yeah, that's from something entirely different. So he says, aye, my lord, we can play the murder of Gonzago. So Hamlet knows this play, the murder of Gonzago. How popular was this play? I have no idea, but Hamlet knows it. And then Hamlet says, great, we'll have it tomorrow night. Okay, great. And then he says, and this is great, and this makes me think, I don't know, maybe I'm reading too much into this, but it makes me think that this was a bit how plays were written back then. It's like, hey, we're going to go perform a play that everyone knows for the queen, but let's add a little speech about politics, or let's add a little speech about the beauty of the queen. Like they would add things and take things out with ease, I think. It wasn't a big deal. So he says, you could, for a need, study a speech of some dozen or 16 lines, which I would set down and insert in it. And the first player says, aye, my lord. Which today, if you said, hey, Ty, can you do the Glass Menagerie? And I'd say, great. And you said, could you do this speech of 16 lines? And I would say, what are you talking about?
I'd be like, how much time do I have? Do you have it written out? Can I look at it? Or, I mean, I need some time to memorize. I'm not very good at memorizing. And I'm like,
are you adding to Tennessee? What are you doing?
Yes.
Yeah, right. But it makes me feel like that was a thing.
Yep. Because he doesn't, there's no pause. He's, granted, the line is, could you not? And there, could you not? So that's 3 beats, and there is a large, space. So there could be a pause before he says, aye, my lord. But why?
I think this is in prose, though.
Exactly. Right. Good point. Something I
Right.
didn't consider. That's why you're here. That's why I'm there.
which,
So
speaking of, Hamlet has been in prose this whole time until he gets to his soliloquy. He goes back in verse. I'm just pointing it out. I'm not giving a reason why, but I'm just pointing that.
by the way, just I'm going to admit, because vulnerability is key nowadays, I still could not. I know if you break it down, I could, but I cannot. I cannot break down verse from prose in terms of always speaking in verse, always speaking in prose. As many times as you explain it to me, even though I know it has to do with the dyadic pentameter,
Mm.
I have a hard time saying, oh, this is prose. But again, I understand it
Well,
intellectually.
Well, I'll be honest with you too. Most of the time, I don't know except for how it looks on the page. That's it. I
Oh,
look down at the page and I go, "Oh, this looks like prose. This looks like that's truly it. Really, that's all I know."
okay.
Yeah.
But I like
and again, I don't think an audience should know.
no.
They shouldn't go, "Oh, he just switched over to he just switched over to verse." No. This is a Harold Bloom thing. This is something an actor should look into. Maybe reason why an audience should know.
Right.
Right.
That's a good point.
So he says, "Hey, do this play." So Hamlet is getting this idea now for what he's going to do to the king. Right. The idea is at least kind of born here, if not well before here, but it's at least vocalized here. Can you do the murder of Gonzago? He's not picking that out random. Murder
No.
of Gonzago is about the murder of a king, and then the murderer takes the king's wife. Hamlet, and we don't know this for sure, but possibly Hamlet's going to add the fact that the murderer is going to do the murder by poisoning the ear. That what we maybe think is what Hamlet is inserting. We don't know that here, but we may think later on. So Hamlet says, very well, to all the players, follow that lord and look you, mock him not, which is very funny. It's again another opportunity, perhaps. Like he's saying, hey, follow Polonius, but go easy on him. Don't make fun of him. Don't give him a hard time. I like that. I always like to see what the actor does with that line. It's like, yeah, he's an easy target, and maybe he doesn't respect you guys, but go easy on him.
Interesting too, because it could be looked at either way. It can be looked at as mock him not, he's a good guy, or it can be like, and look, you mock him not. You know, which is the jerky way of doing it, but hopefully it's not that.
Yes, right. We had the first time I did it, Polonius had walked off in a huff, and then one of the players walked off in a huff, and I had to stop him and say, don't do that. Don't do that to him. Like, just he means well. So exit Polonius and players.
The good lords, I leave you till night. You're welcome to Elsinore. Another welcome, in case you didn't know.
Yes, and what's funny is we kind of forget that RNG are there this entire time. They've seen all of this, and it's almost comical, and it plays comically when you do it on stage. That everyone leaves, and Hamlet's standing there, and there are these two fucking dicks still standing there. Yep. It's quite funny. Yes. And then Hamlet kind of notices, like, you guys probably should have left with everybody else. You probably should have taken that. It's a great little moment. And then he says, and yes, you pointed out, he says, my good friends, I'll leave you tonight. You are welcome to Elsinore. Yeah, he keeps repeating that.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And of course, Rosencrantz says, good, my lord.
Right.
So goodbye to you. Okay.
I love it.
So
it's weird that in my text I have good, my lord, exit Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and then Hamlet's line, I so God bye to you, or God be with you. I think that stage direction is wrong. I think I'd have to look in the folio to see where it's put. In the Burton production, one thing that I remember very clearly from the Burton production was that he used all three of these goodbyes to try to get rid of them. So they're standing there and he says, My good friends, I'll leave you till night. And they still don't move. You are welcome to Elsinore. In other words, go find your room. And they still don't move. Rosencrantz says, good, my lord. And then he says, I so, God be with you. And they still, you know what I mean? Like he's trying to tell them, please go. Please go. It's time to go.
So goodbye to you. But yes, either way is effective.
Yeah. But he basically tells them good night 3 times in a row.
Yes.
To try to get them to go. And then
nothing. Then the act ends. Oh.
And then the play ends. Yes. Are we going into the soliloquy tonight?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean,
and then
because we are finishing this act.
Yeah, we are, my friend. And then if you realize, and as an audience member, I always realize this, since after Hamlet saw the ghost and he did, oh, all you host of heaven, since then, this is the first time that we get Hamlet by himself. We get to hear from Hamlet. And we've talked about those 3 months passing by, him putting on the antic disposition, his relationship with all these things happen. Finally, he looks right at us and we get to hear from him, which I think we've been waiting on. We've been waiting to hear from him. And it's one of those moments I mentioned in a previous episode that there's a couple of soliloquies that goes from a group of people leaving the stage and one man standing by himself. It's very effective. This is one of those moments, yeah. But he looks, now I am alone. He looks right at us. And as audience members, we should be like just thirsty for his true opinion. What's going on with you right now? Yeah.
So why don't you throw it at us? Give us rogue and peasant slave on the 1 and the
2. 5, 6, 7, 8. Now I am alone. Oh, what a rogue and peasant slave am I. Is it not monstrous that this player here, but in a fiction, in a dream of passion, could force his soul so to his own conceit that from her working all his visage wand, tears in his eyes, distraction in's aspect, a broken voice, and his whole function suiting with forms to his conceit, and all for nothing. For Hecuba. What's Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba, that he should weep for her? What would he do had he the motive and the cue for passion that I have? He would drown the stage with tears and cleave the general ear with horrid speech, make mad the guilty and appall the free, confound the ignorant and amaze indeed the very faculties of eyes and ears. Yet I, a dull and muddy-mettled rascal, peep like Jana dreams, unpregnant of my cause, and can say nothing, no, not for a king, upon whose property and most dear life a damned defeat was made. Am I a coward? Who calls me villain, breaks my pate across, plucks off my beard and blows it in my face, tweaks me by the nose, gives me the lie in the throat as deep as the lungs? Who does me this, huh? So I should take it, for it cannot be, but I am pigeon-livered and lack gall to make oppression bitter. Or ere this, I should have fatted all the region kites with his slaves, awful, bloody, bawdy villain, remorseless, treacherous, lecherous, kindless, villain of vengeance. Why, what an ass am I? Yeah, this is most brave that I, the son of a dear father, murdered, prompted to my revenge by heaven and hell, must like a whore unpack my heart with words and fall a cursing like a very drab, a scullion, fie upon it, foe about my brains. I have heard that guilty creatures sitting at a play have, by the very cunning of the scene, been struck so to the soul that presently they have proclaimed their malefactions. For murder, though it have no tongue, will speak with most miraculous organ. I'll have these players play something like the murder of my father before mine uncle. I'll observe his looks. I'll tent him to the quick if he do blench. I know my course. The spirit I've seen may be the devil, and the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape, yea, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, as he's very potent with such spirits, abuses me to damn me. I'll have grounds more relative than this. The play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king.
Bravo. Good work.
Good,
Excellent.
good speech. Thank you, my friend.
Now talk to me about it. Talk to me about the speech. There's some very interesting. There's a very sharp turn around the middle. But talk to me about the speech. What is it? What does it mean to you? What does it say to you? What is he saying? What's happening here? Am I lost?
Very, very, very self-aware at the beginning. So this whole time we've heard about this time passage, and we've kind of, as an audience, maybe we haven't forgotten, but we've certainly gotten away from the job at hand, the avenging my father's murder at hand. And maybe we're starting to wonder, hey, what are you doing? What are you doing about this? Like, the ghost told you this thing and told you to go do this thing, and now what's going on? And he looks right at us and goes, I don't know why I don't have the passion that this actor has. So he's looking at us saying, I'm very aware that I can't muster up this emotion, that I can't muster up the fight that this actor did on something that's completely made up. So as audience members, we go, oh, good, we're getting back to the original plot. It's also the respect Hamlet has for the actors, for the respect of what the actor just did. I love all that. It's beating himself up, which I love because I do that all the time. Beat myself up. Why did I do that? Why didn't I do this? What's wrong with me? Lashing out at himself, even trying to act the part, Paul. I love that. Treacherous, lecherous, kindless villain. Oh, vengeance. And then immediately goes, I tried. Didn't work. What an ass.
Yeah,
I
love
that. Love that moment. I remember I used to step away from the spot and look back at the spot and be like, I tried. It didn't work out. And I don't have the answer as to why not. And then he says, about my brain, which I really love, like let's about face, 180 degree, stop beating yourself up. The only weird thing about this speech is that it sounds like he's coming up with the idea in the moment, but in fact, he's already come up with the idea.
Yeah.
What is your take on that? How does that hit your ear?
Yeah, the change, it's quite startling because it's very kind of like false passion, false hubris, insecurity, just, beating himself up. And then it goes when he said, this is the thing I was going to ask you about too. He says, like a whore, unpack my heart with words. How is that like a whore? That's, I don't know what that means.
Yeah.
And fall a cursing like a drab. What whore does that? What whores are Hamlet going to? I don't know these whores. Who are these whores? I think he's going to the wrong whores.
What's with these whores?
What's the deal with these whores? They keep fucking their hearts with words and fall a cursing like a drab, a very drab stallion. Fly upon its foe. That's where I get confused about what is he talking about. And then so he goes on this rage, just like he was on a joy kind of rant with everything. Now he's on like a self-flagellation rant. He's just like, I'm an idiot, I hate myself, and I have heard that guilty creature sitting at a
Well, I think the about my brains is him switching, doing an about face, right?
Yes.
Yeah. But he's
said,
trying to work himself up. Even the whole who calls me villain, he's trying to put on this thing. And it just doesn't work. It's not him. It's not this thing that he's trying to put on. He can't even put it on himself. Because again, he's not a man of action. The whole dilemma of this play is you have a philosophy guy, a thinker who solved everything by thinking, is then tasked to be a man of action like his father, and he's having a hard time figuring out how to become that person.
And because he has clashing thoughts and ideas in his head, I mean, in terms of, right, I guess, I mean, how you read it was beautiful, and, how an actor can read the soliloquy, in terms of Hamlet's twisting, turning mind to go from fie upon it foe about my brains hum, because I have a dash before the hum. I don't know what that means, why there's a dash there. Maybe
About
it
my
might have been
brains. Yeah, I've got a dash. See, in the Arden, there's a dash after. Let's see what it is in the folio here, in the Neil Freeman folio. The most miraculous. Let's go. Yeah, about my brain. There's nothing. It just goes right on. Yeah, it's a real quick interruption of himself.
Again, I'm probably reading modern Folger translation, whatever you want to call it, because there's an exclamation point after brains, a dash before hum. Maybe they're doing their own indication of the beat chains. I'm not sure. But in terms of, and he is speaking in verse about my brains, hum, I have heard. So he's got, I keep hitting the wrong key. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Oh, darn it. About my brains, hum, I have heard. I only count 7.
Yeah, in the folio I have no hum at all. I have a line of 11. So a scallion, which can be, let's say 2, a scallion, phi, a pont, foe, about my brain. Oh, that's 10. So it ends, in the folio, it ends with about my brain. So you can hold that as long as you want.
Well, see,
And
that's
then it
funny.
goes.
My Folger has different line. They're on different lines.
Yeah, the Arden has different lines as well. Yeah, that's, I guess, is more of a quarto 2 thing, I guess. I'm not sure. Let me see what this says. With this, if it has any notation. Yeah. It doesn't. Yeah, I mean, you get to kind of choose. Yeah, it does say in this, some modern text set it differently, so you do get to choose, but I like the line ending being about my brain. It gives you a moment to breathe before you get on to the next thought.
I like it too. Unfortunately, if I was going by the Folgers, there's no line to end. It's at the beginning of the line. About my brains is the first, is the beginning of the line, and then it ends with hum I have heard is the end of the line.
Yeah, I see that in the Arden as well. Huh, interesting.
Because you'd want, maybe that's why they put that dash. I don't know, because it certainly it begs for a line ending, but it's not it's not the end of the line.
It is. So, but if you were performing this and you were doing it, the folio backs you up there.
Okay.
I mean, about my brain is definitely.
Can I bring the folio with me on stage to show?
Yes, and say, see there. Yes, right. And again, these are opportunities. These are suggestions. These are, once you get up on your feet, you play it. It will play the way it is. But it is a turn. Why? Yeah, I'm never quite sure what to do. Does he come up with the idea then? Does he come up? Because he comes up with the idea during asking the first player to do Murder of Gonzaga.
Exactly. He, as you very well mentioned before, he already has the idea. And in his, speeding himself up, I forgot the term for it, but he maybe forgets himself. He's too busy.
Unless it's just an explanation to the audience. I mean, you can play it as, I've heard the guilty creature sitting at a play. I mean, and isn't this lovely? You're talking to an audience who is sitting at a play, watching an actor play a character who is looking at an audience, talking about an audience who is sitting at a play. Holy smokes, it doesn't get much better than that. In this whole speech, I have always felt like kind of my goal and kind of what happens in this speech is actor character becomes very blurred. Audience play becomes very blurred. And I think when it works well, that's what happens. You start to lose because you have an actor on stage playing a character referring to himself as a bad actor. It's great. And referring to an audience as an audience sitting at a play. It's fantastic. There's so much freedom in that. So anyways, he's saying, look, I've heard this thing. So when he says, I'll have the players play something like The Murder of My Father, maybe he's just explaining what that whole murder of Gonzago thing was a second ago. He's like, hey, you may have heard me say this thing. I'm going to have them play this thing and then I'm going to watch him. That's why I said that earlier. So maybe it's an explanation.
This is your favorite soliloquy in the play, right?
My favorite Shakespeare soliloquy ever. Yes.
Wow.
Well, because it's because he's so self-aware. And I just always remember blurring I just like the meta sense of theater about it. I loved doing it because you get to step out of yourself for a second and look right at the audience and refer to them as an audience and you as an actor. There's something really remarkable. And I'm somebody who beats myself up constantly about stuff, who constantly says, why am I not better at this? Why am I not doing better? Why am I wasting time? What's wrong with me? I don't have all that kind of stuff. So I just totally relate. And I look at other people and go, why is that person who's less talented than me, but way more driven than I am? All that kind of stuff. I just relate to it. Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. It's a speech that I've never, for lack of a better expression, I mean, we are reading Shakespeare, I've never marked. I've never
Sure.
I've always to be or not to be, of course, but also to sully flesh. Those are the ones that always spoke to me the most.
Yeah.
And then Host of Heaven, that's more of a monologue, not a soliloquy, because the other guys are there.
No, that's one of his 7 soliloquies. It certainly is. Yeah.
Host of Heaven, it's a lamentation. I don't, I never connect with that one as much as the other two. But yeah, and of course, you and I discussed at length, this is the one soliloquy, your favorite, that is cut out of Olivier's Hamlet for, a number of reasons. And so, yeah, I don't know. I will note that because, it's something that I haven't studied it. I studied the text of Olivia, not
well,
and
I think, yeah, and I also think, for me, it comes from the first time I put the shoes on too. So there's a personal connection there too. You know what I mean? Like when I put the shoes on, I remember getting to this moment in the play and everyone exiting and you get to say, I am alone. And it's really raw. It's more raw than sullied flesh because now you're carrying this idea of the ghost and the murdered father. You're carrying all this stuff with you.
Yeah.
And you're looking right out at the audience. And I think there's just an effect I have on having played it before and what I was able to do with it, and the meta sense of looking at the audience and being so close to calling everything out for exactly. I mean, you in this speech, you come right up against, you do everything short of saying, you bought a ticket to watch me do this tonight. I mean, you get that close. Right? You get that close to it. And there's something exhilarating about that. I remember that one night at Paul, I remember there was a Saturday night. It was our last Saturday night at Kingsman. And it may be one of my greatest moments in my career. It was just a night that everything was working. We were, doing Hamlet, and man, the audience was with us and we were on board. And this speech just flew. And I remember saying, unpack my heart with words. And somehow in my head, I connected that to words, just in my head. And I felt like people in the front row got it because they laughed and they giggled. And then I responded to their laugh. I looked right at them and smiled. Like there was this connection that was happening that night that was remarkable during this speech. Yeah, so I'm not saying on the page it's the greatest speech ever written, but for me, for what it did for me as a young man when I was 25 and what it still does for me and the way I can just kind of recite it, I just mean something. It means something for me. Yeah.
That's beautiful. Yeah. I mean, it's as I
Yeah.
mentioned at the start of this portion of Act Two, this final third, is the most complex for me and the most difficult for me to grasp onto and to
Uh-huh.
fully understand. So,
Yeah.
but I want
Yeah.
to, I
Yeah.
want to.
It's a very emotional, I find, when doing it. You can do Fishmonger, you can do Rosencrantz and Guildenstern, and you're getting information, you're reacting to stuff. But then the joy of the players, that speech about Hecuba, and then this, it gets very emotionally driven in the play. And listen, let's point out the fact that he's still partly, at least partly, doubting that the ghost is the spirit of his father. The spirit that I have seen may be the devil, and the devil hath power to assume a pleasing shape. Yea, and perhaps out of my weakness and my melancholy, the very, very potent such words, abuses me to damning. He's still doubting it. He's still
Yeah.
doubting it.
Well,
He's
he's
still
like,
overthinking it, if you will.
well, just looking a little further, absolutely he's overthinking it, because what's his plan? Not to kill Claudius. We're gonna hold up. I could kill Claudius, but first I'm going to present a play.
I need more proof. Yeah, I need
and
more
then
proof. How am I going to
see
get
if he
that?
reacts to that? And then I'm going to, consider it more
Right.
than I was before. So let's just
Which is also interesting. We're talking about his love for the theater. Maybe he overestimates the theater a little bit, but he's saying, I need more proof. So how do I get it? I'm going to put on a play.
That's right. That's how proof is usually done in modern times.
Yeah, every Columbo episode.
Yeah, exactly. Well, who's putting on the play tonight?
Yeah, just one
Mike
more
Nichols.
thing.
I hope Mike Knuckles is going to direct this one. What's his name? Knuckles? No, Nichols. Okay, whatever.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I think that's great. That's an insight to who he is. And he says, these just this whole great thing, very self-aware. I love how self-aware he is. What is Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba, that he should weep for her? So if you look on the line ending, I'm looking at the folio right now, and the word for Hecuba, ? Is on a line by itself. Is it like that in the Folger for you? I'm gonna look at the Arden here. Yes, in the Arden it says, and all it's for nothing for Hecuba, with a big space after for Hecuba. Famously, Ben Kingsley, a young Ben Kingsley, was in a small theater, exited out the side door after for Hecuba, and then immediately came busting back in and then what is Hecuba to him, or he to Hecuba? That's how he used that space.
I love that. Because that is a space. Cool. Yeah, that's awesome.
That is a space. Yeah, as if you're almost done, right? And all for nothing for Hecuba. I'm done with this. You turn around but you just can't. You just have more to say. What is Hecuba to him, or it's eating me up inside. Yeah, which is pretty great. Now I am alone is a line ending, which I suggest in rehearsals you try to hold that line ending as long as possible. Just let it suspend there.
And well, yeah, it is, because it's yeah. I mean, it's fun the way it's written here in the Folgers. I so goodbye to you, and then it has Hamlet interrupting his own thoughts on different line. Now I am alone. But right, written as one, that is definitely a line ending. Unless you want to go, now I am alone. Oh, what?
Yes, right. So when we do our next episode, we go from this. The next thing we see from Hamlet is maybe the most famous line in English literature. The next thing Hamlet says is, to be or not to be.
Wow.
Which I can defend both sides of it. I can say, it shows a linear break, and somebody who is obsessive compulsive like Hamlet finds his job and continues straight on the mission. Or it goes to show how difficult his mind is working at the moment. The fact that he has this resolution of the play's the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. And then he's talking about suicide. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean,
I go back and forth on what I like better. And you're backed up kind of by Quarto 1 if you want to change the order of things.
it I like the idea. This is a guy, he's told by a ghost, father was murdered by your uncle. I'm going to take care of that. And then he's like, oh, stuff. And yeah, I don't know. And what do you think out of us for? And then he's like, okay, oh, rogue, what a rogue and peasant slave am I? I tell you, I hear you put on a play. And then so you think, the play's the thing, will catch the conscience of the king. Yay. And then the next thing you see him, he's like, to be or not to be.
Yes.
I can't.
Yes. It's a little.
He manic depressive. Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, he definitely is manic and definitely has a depressive side, but it is a curious turn in the context you just presented, because at least the way to be or not to be appears in Act 3, it's like, why then? Why no? It could have appeared at least in this folder edition, it could have shown up at any other time that we've experienced so far during the production.
You can pick it up and put it in a lot of other plays too at many different moments, and it would make just as much sense as where it is now.
Yes.
So if you do move it, then you go from plays the thing wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king, and the next thing you see is speak the speech I pray you as I pronounced it to you, trippingly on the tongue. He's getting the players ready for the play.
That's how it would seem logically it would be.
Yes.
But again, this is more intellectual than, I don't know, maybe logical, if that makes any sense. Probably doesn't.
No,
but,
it does. Yeah, I get that.
Because in addition to he is royalty, he is a prince, he is a man at unrest. He is not Rambo. He is someone that can have that excitable moment and have an empowerment, and then the next moment be like, oh my God, this is a disaster. This isn't
questioning everything. Yeah, right.
What am I thinking? A play? I'm supposed to kill a king. What the play gonna do? To be or not to be? That is the question. But it's just nobler the mind to suffer this thing order. So it really does, and I never thought of it this way. But yeah, it really puts to be or not to be in a very different context, because you take out to be or not to be and put it in place of Tutu Sully Flesh works perfectly. Too perfectly. But then and if we'll never know if this was Shakespeare's intention to place it as it is in Act 3, or what is called Act 3, its placement is so integral to its context. I don't know why I never thought of it before. It never occurred to me. All the productions we've seen of Hamlet, us doing Hamlet, I'm like, yeah, that is odd, because we begin Act 3, spoiler alert, of course, not with Hamlet, but with the king and Rosencrantz and Guildenstern reporting on it, and then here's what he's saying, and this is what happened, and bada boom, and here, okay, I hear him coming, let's withdraw. I'm gonna, Polonius takes out an heiress, and all bets are off. And what is Hamlet? So and then, well, again, we're overstepping our bounds. We're not in Act 3 yet, but yes. When I think about how, granted, we've extended this, we're doing scene by scene, but Jesus, if you makes me think, how could anybody watch this play? There's too much going on.
Oh, it's dense, my friend. Yeah, it is dense.
We just finished Act 2, and it's a 5-act play.
I know.
But
he is, and this is where, he has set us up. This is where I feel logically the intermission goes. I always like an intermission where there would be a slight passage of time anyways. I feel like wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king is a great intermission in modern productions, unless you are Paul Giamatti, whereas you took the intermission after the closet scene with Gertrude. Oh my goodness.
That's a bit of a mistake.
Oh, it was an over 2-hour first act. Yeah.
Oh God. But I think you and I have experienced that with one of the things we saw, didn't we?
Yeah, there was something that the first act went way too long. I just think it's a good natural break, and like, all right, we're going to put on this play. Now we got to end, because when we come back, it's a jump in time a bit. But anyways, that's something that we will figure out in the next episode. Yeah, that's a great finish. We're in the play's the thing, wherein I'll catch the conscience of the king. Again, ending with a rhyming couplet. Um, this
Do
is
you
this is a
know?
this is yeah.
Oh, what were you going to say?
No, I was going to say, mind, this is a world that people speak in rhyming couplets sometimes, right? You got to lean into that stuff. Don't shy away from that. Lean into it.
Yes.
It's not a world that we know, but
No.
it's a world that somehow gets closer to the truth. Yeah.
Well, let's see. As I'm very badly paraphrasing you, but it's an artificiality that reveals a truth.
Yes, it's like theater is more artificial than real life, but at the same time more truthful. Yeah.
This is how many episodes have we done of this?
I think this is our eighth, maybe.
Seventh or eighth, and we're only finishing Act Two just now.
I know. Isn't it great? Isn't
It
it great?
is. It's great. I will never think of Hamlet, look at Hamlet, think, perceive Hamlet, sing about
No.
Hamlet ever again the same way.
It's
It will
true.
always be, but that's great. I want to do that with, of course, every Shakespeare play.
Sure.
Even the,
Yeah.
that's the Winter's Tale
Well,
next. No. Um,
and also I feel like, and this is a positive thing, we're not walking away having solved everything. We're not walking away
No.
having solved anything. We're not answering everything. We're walking away still with questions in our mind that makes us want to go see this play again to see how they answered the questions, how they tackled these issues, how they interpreted these lines. It's not like we're studying it going, we've found the key. It's not. It gives us it's a more respect for the play, but at the same time, maybe more questions for the play. And maybe that's why I like it so much.
yeah. I think one of the reasons why we're doing this now is that, and again, forgive me for my poetry, but Shakespeare weaves a very rich tapestry. Sorry, everyone. That you, and rich in the sense that it is so deep that you can't help but want to go back to it.
Right.
And so we are, even though you and I have seen Hamlet a million times and have read the play, experienced the play, thought about the play, in my case, sung the play. I don't know when I did that, but apparently I did.
Yeah, you do.
We still are like, hey, let's go through it again
I know.
and see what we can glean from it this time around, because the next time around, we're going to get something different from it.
Right.
And let's, give ourselves a pregnant perspective filled with our experiences doing this, so that the next time we experience a Hamlet on film, video, or in my case, song, again, I haven't made this production, but it's going to happen at some point, apparently. It's as our beloved Eden Bernardi would say, our work is being placed into the brain pan where our system is digested, and it will nurture us, like all things we put into the brain pan, so that when we speak the speech, when we see the productions, when we think about it, it's with us. That's why I think this is important for the two of us, and for those three of you out there who are watching this. Thank you, Mom.
Yeah.
Thank you. Strange aunts and uncles. So I'm very excited that we're doing this, and I'm curious to see what happens in Act 3. I don't know. Could be.
So it's true. So there you go. That's Act 1 and Act 2, as most modern texts put it. There we go. And we're getting back to the main plot here.
Yes.
Great, my friend.
This is
good work.